BE, or Black Economic Empowerment, is not affirmative action. Because affirmative action is, when you implement affirmative action, it means that you will favor one race over the other. All right? And that's not BE. And if you believe that BE is about affirmative action, I'm here to help you to say, please, that belief is not true. Right? The second one is BE is reverse racism. Of course, the way that BE is implemented and is structured, all right, it seeks to redress the imbalances that were created in the past. And the only way you can redress the imbalances is that you're going to be biased towards the one that was disfavored previously so that you bring them on par. And I'll give you an example, and I won't use the running example. And I'll use, so if you are, there's a rugby team called the Griquas. If you are the Griquas, or you are a player that played for the Griquas and you need to be graduated into the SIPA 15, right? You're not going to arrive and you are in the first team. It doesn't mean you are not good enough as a player, but it means that there's still some things that needs to be added into you to make you such that you are at the level in which you can compete at that level. All right. Because if we take you wherever you are an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, I don't know what age they start playing these days, and in your very first game, you play against the Highlanders, and you happen to be from the Griquas. No matter how good you are, chances are the stage itself that you are presented to, just that environment. If for those who are fortunate enough, I'm very sure most of us watch rugby on TV, if you see the Highlanders play, and especially if they play at their home ground, it's intimidating. The field just that color of theirs, I don't like it much, but you just get intimidated by that. And if we are not, and I'm not saying the Kruger is not a good team, I'm saying the environment they play is not the same environment in which they enter that stadium. I mean, it's like a palace. That just tends, good thing no South African team has that color. And you will be so intimidated that you might not perform at the level that you perform, right? So there must be some assistance so that we can bring you to that level. So, and that's what BE does. It's not reverse racism. It's you trying to address a deficiency, all right, by creating favoring conditions for one over the other so that we can all compete. All right? Because in a property environment, as a black person, before 1994, by law, I couldn't own property. I can only rent property from government. That's it. By law. Right? So think about it. If I wanted to be if I'm a black child and I grow up, and black in generic, Indian, colored, and Africans, is that I'm growing up. It's not 1994. I was born 1994. I was already probably starting to work or working somewhere there. My aspiration as a child as I'm growing up never would have been to be a property person. Because it's not in my catalog of the things that by law I'm allowed to do. So I wouldn't have aspired to be an estate agent. It's not possible. Whose house am I going to sell? Understand? So come 1994, somebody says, no, everybody can operate everywhere. So what it means that all of a sudden, I must compete with somebody, with a child of same age as me, who has 1994, let's say I was 20 years old, right? I have 20 years of zero exposure to property. I must compete with somebody who has 20 years exposure, because as a white population, the child as it grows up, the same age as me, would have grown up knowing that I'm aspiring to own my own house. So they're already in their mental setup. And it's already there. So there's no way that you can allow us to compete. Because first I must gain the knowledge of, oh, okay, what is it to own property? Do you understand the logic? So it's not reverse racism. Myth number 3 is that BEE is anti-white. Right? Now, the way the presentation is set up in 4 sections. Okay? Yeah, all right. 4 sections. And then what I will try and do in those 4 sections is to be able to introduce you to the fact that the essence of BEE, it's about growth and development. It's about spreading the cake. It's about making the cake, the economic cake, bigger so that we can all share. Right? And in the process of making that cake bigger, because now we all have to equally compete, right? As I said, you have to address the fact that some of us just, by the environment, we're disadvantaged, and you have to deal with that disadvantage. So I'll take you through that logic, why BEE was set up and what it tends to achieve, right? Because BEE is fundamentally and purely about economic growth and development. That's what is it about. And it's about allowing every citizen of this country to participate fair and equitable in the economy. But it's about economic participation. That's what it's about. Right? And then from there out, towards the midday, we do the difficult part, which is the legalese. We go into the legalese. So I love the first part, and I know I'm going to do it quicker, but I love the first part. And yeah, because it's much more interesting. So before 1994, and we'll go through the numbers, 10% of the population, even now it's less than 10%. 10% of the population is white. 10% of the population was allowed to participate in the property sector. That means that my family's property, which they didn't own, it belonged to the municipality, they own it now. When it was not available to whoever was the estate agent at that time, was not even that person was not allowed to touch my property or my family's property. So, pre-democracy, the disadvantage that exists did not exist only for black people. They existed for both of us. Because you are denied as a South African to exercise your democratic right to economically participate in an economy where blacks are living. So if you sell tomatoes, you're not allowed to go sell tomatoes to black people. Right? So if there were 100 people in a room, 10 were white, 90 were black, you're only allowed to sell to the 10. So your success would be derived from the 10. The other 90, you're not allowed to deal with. So even if you become the best tomato seller, and I feel like, I like those tomatoes, I'm one of the 90, I can buy from you. That means you're denied the opportunity to also grow as an entrepreneur. Because your growth as an entrepreneur was reinforced to the 10, not to the 100. And what BEE says, it says, no. As a South African, you should be allowed to trade with the 100, not the 10. Right. That is why some of the predominantly, traditionally black estate agencies could proudly go and open offices in black areas. Right? If BEE was reverse racism, then there would have been a law that says only black business will operate in the black areas and white business will operate in white areas. And you'll see as we go through this, it says that all South Africans should have a fair and an equitable economic participation in the country. Nobody should stop you from operating anywhere where you want to. If you want to go sell tomatoes in Makaza, you should be able to go and do that. Nobody should be able to stop you doing it. And that's what BEE is about. And then I'll take you through the legislation. All right. There's one or two myths that I'll tell you. There's 5 of them. I told you 3 that we'll deal with. So I'm hoping that at least I'm beginning to demystify some of the beliefs that you might have had, and then we can engage. At any given time, you can raise your hand, ask me a question. I don't mind to be disturbed. Okay. So for the reason that BEE is about economics, that is why the department that is responsible for implementation of black economic empowerment is the DTI, because the DTI is responsible for trade and investment. Right. Because if BE was about race, it would have gone to Home Affairs, because Home Affairs is about me and you, and what is our color, and what is our birth, and what is our surnames, and whatever. All right. Because Home Affairs captures that information. It's important to them. But it's not about that. It's about trade and investment. It's about economic opportunities. And it's about saying that for us to allow all South Africans to participate in the mainstream economy meaningfully, it means that we need to be able to assist all of us to participate. If Mashilo spends 20 years of his early life or 22 years of his early life not having access to anything property, and at some point we wake up and I have to be in property. I've been in property for about 20 years. My first job was a property company. 22 years now, I think. My first job was a property company, right? I worked for a company called Retail International. They develop shopping centers and they manage shopping centers. This is 94. Before 94, no black person. And also that came by accident. I was going to a job I did accounting and all of these fancy things, corporate finance. And I so happened that job happens to be in a property company. It's accident. Because there's no way that a black person or a black child would have had property as an idea of a career. We all wanted to be accountants, doctors, lawyers, teachers. And hopefully, if anything else fails, you'll be a police or a soldier. In actual fact, even accounting, I wanted to be an accountant. And I went to a University of the North, which is now called University of Limpopo. I had to leave that university to go to Wits University. That's where I graduated with my first degree. And the reason purely for that is because if you had to do accounting in those days, you're only allowed to graduate from certain universities, and there was 4 of them. Unless you are in those 4 or 5, you wouldn't be an accountant. So it means that even academically, if I had to go and compete, let's say, fine, I wanted to be an accountant. I'm either at Wits, UCT, University of Natal, I don't know what it's called these days, Rau, which was called in those days, and then I think Stellenbosch, marginally, Pretoria and Stellenbosch, sorry, 6. And I'm doubtful about Pretoria. If you're not in one of those universities, you wouldn't have been an accountant. Right?
Sorry, can I ask why?
Because they were the only universities that were accredited that when you do a degree, it was called B-Arc, you can go and write the board exam. If you didn't do a B-Arc counting, whatever degree it was from them, you wouldn't be allowed to write the board exam. The rest, no. So that means, so that's the thing. So, I mean, there am I. And I'll let you on a secret. I didn't apply to go to Wits. I just rocked up. I was studying. I left in the middle of I finished my first year with 5 distinctions, and I decided I want to be an accountant. This university that I'm at, it's useless. I don't care there's distinction. I took my bag. I didn't tell my parents I went to Wits. I rocked up in the middle of the year, and I said, guys, I want to study here. And they said, no, but we have registered. I went to class. And I attended. The road test. And I insisted. And I kept going to class. You understand? But remember, this is pre-1994. It's a risk that most of us were willing to take, right? There are lots of students who were expelled from these institutions. But what it was giving you is an access to a career that you wouldn't have naturally had access to. The same with property. So that's what BEE is trying to address, right? To level the playing field. Right? You can see it in the first paragraph. That's what it is doing. And it is saying that by opening up the opportunities, right, economically, and you'll see later on as we go through the elements about BEB, it's got 7 elements. And you'll notice that the base element, which is very important that you have to deal with, if you're going to allow everybody in the country to participate economically, you have to have a way in which you allow them to participate. So if I spend first 22 years of my life not knowing anything about property, that means zero. And you say to me, now, Mashilo, you can participate, you can be an estate agent. You have to allow me to be able to compete with the person who has that exposure. And you'll note as we go along, there's one of the things that you'll see is that skills development, it becomes one of those fundamental things. Because I know what I know, I don't know what I don't know. Unless I have exposure, normally exposure comes via education. Then I know what I ought to know, right? So with us sitting in here, that is part of that. You understand? It's part of allowing everybody entry, equal and a fair entry, right? What is equal and a fair entry? It means that it is not about your color that you have to sit here. It's about the career you want to go to. It says, if you want to be an agent, we don't care whether you're black or white, you must do NQF 4, or you must do NQF 5, you must do NQF 7. Because then it says, irrespective of your color, you have an equal and a fair access to the same thing. Pre-1994, you had Job Reservation Act. It says, if you are of a particular color, there are certain jobs you wouldn't do. You're not allowed to do. Never. No matter whether you dream, you can never, ever do. Which is why it is very important that we understand BEE in that respect, where it says, we want to allow fair and equitable participation of all citizens of the country, because it is about growth and development and nothing else. And Anetsi says, if it's implemented well, we are all profitable. So you're no longer transacting with the 10, you're not selling to 10, you're now selling to 100. You'll be far more profitable because you are selling to a much larger group. What is the most profitable time in the property sector? 2003 is correct, because that's where the curve started to 10. 2003, 2004, it's correct. Started to 10 there. But the most profitable between 2006 and 2009 were the 3 or 4 years of, you could sell, you didn't have to be a genius. You walk out of the door, somebody's buying something. Who do you think was buying? They had a name for it. Black diamonds. So all of a sudden, you're an estate agent, you're selling to a group of 10, and this bunch of people just rocked up at your doorstep that you had to deal with, right? Which they never existed. So that's what BEE does. It says, let's expand the cake. But that cake was not exclusive. When the black diamonds rocked up at all our doorsteps, right? It didn't say, no, these are exclusive for a particular race. It says you can trade with them whomever you are. As long as you are a South African, trade with this bunch. Estate agents and car salespeople were the most happiest of the lot, and that's what it is about. Now, post-2009, what is the segment of residential that is most profitable now? It's township properties. For the past 5 years, without a doubt, since 2009, the residential property market in South Africa has been carried by township properties. Right? And we're going to go through the numbers, and when you go through the statistics of who are the people who are participating, who are the beneficiaries of this boom, right? You'd see that the numbers are not representative of what the South Africa that we aspire to look for looks like, and we need to be able to deal with that. The 7 elements of BEE. So most people focus on number 1, because number 1 is easy to deal with, right? It's direct. It's the easier one. At the same time, number 1 is also the one that most people get upset about, right? Because it's like, no, but I started my company. How dare you wanting me to give you a slice of my own company? Who are you to come here and demand that I give you a slice of my company? That is myth number 4. Nowhere in the BEE legislation, nowhere, can read it back to front, whatever, you can listen to anybody. It says that you must take a slice of your company and give it to somebody else. But what it says is that we must allow black people to participate in owning means of production or in owning companies. How that comes about, it's a conversation that me and you engage in. Whether you give me a slice of your company, or you take your company, I take my company, we go and take an opportunity together, understand? It doesn't really matter. Back to my example of a 100. So you used to trade with 10, there was a 90 that's available. So the 90 rocks up on the market. The black diamonds rocks up to the market. They were not part of your transactioning, right? So instead of saying, okay, I've got my agency business and I'm going to slice it in half because the law says I must give the half to Mashilo, right? As I said, there's no way in the law where it says you must give half to Mashilo. No way. Right? What ownership talks about, it says that you can go to Mashilo and say, you know what, Mashilo? I need to take advantage of the 90. I've been in this industry for whatever, many years, 20 years. You've been in this industry for 0 years, right? Me and you can partner, form an entity, or we can partner, do a JV, or we can start our own new company together, all right? Where we have 60, 40, 50, 50, 30, 70, 80, 20, 90, 10, whatever slices that you divide that new company, and we're going to attack the 90 together. It has nothing to do with your 10. It has everything to do with the 90, the opportunity that the economic opportunity that's there. So all of a sudden, all right? Because nobody took up, B doesn't take away the 10. It never said you can't do the 10. It says, let's attack the 90. All of a sudden, you are now participating somewhere where you wouldn't, right? So that means the slice that we are now looking for between me and you, it's a bigger slice. You might find that in the 90, you end up with a 20 as opposed to the limitation of a 10. Right? And that's how you engage with BEE. You know, because if you engage it, so the element says ownership, and that's how you engage it. But if you engage it with a mindset that says, no, I need to take a slice and I need to give it to somebody. So you know, we all don't want to lose, but we all want to gain, right? But if you engage it with a mindset that says, there's a much bigger slice that I need to deal with, it's a better way of engaging it. So there's 7 elements. Ownership. Management control is about executive control and economic rights, voting rights, board of directors, voting rights, you understand? So it's executive management, board of directors, and the representation of black in that. Employment equity is about the different levels in companies from the junior all the way to the senior management. That's employment equity, the representation. Skills development is straightforward. We're sitting here because of that reason. Skills development and preferential procurement. In skills development, it also involved being the ability to be able to give. It's not only about training. It's about opening skills doors to other people. That's why you've got these programs like internships, mentoring, and those things. So all of that is skills development. That is not always that you have to put money in your pocket to be able to provide skills, but it also allows for the fact that there are instances where you can mentor a person. You can say, you know what, I know a child that is very good, he can make a very good estate agent, but I don't have the money to give to him, but I can mentor this child. You understand? I can coach him. I can make him my intern. Whichever way in which you engage this thing. You understand? It's not always about putting money into the pocket, because that's how sometimes we view BEE, to say it's about putting money into the pocket. Preferential procurement is about where you're buying. It says that's why they use the word preferential. It comes from preference. When you procure goods and services, including your small boards, you make a deliberate choice to say that I will procure from black-owned entities. Because let's be honest, B, it's about black. That's why it's called broad-based black economic empowerment, right? It's about allowing black people to participate in the economy. And the only way you allow them to participate is by, when they start businesses, is to buy from them. And then enterprise development is the same as coaching and mentoring in skills development, but now you are coaching and mentoring a business. You are giving them support. Like I was saying, 22 years, nothing about property. Obviously, the first couple of years that I end up in a property company, there are certain things that I wouldn't have known in my entire life if I had wanted to. So the couple of those years, they would have spent instilling certain things that I need to know about property. So if I had started a business at that point, that would be that assistant. So they might say, okay, we know that this Mashilo has started a consulting business. I'm the managing director of a company called Tsebo Real. Tsebo Real is a consultancy, asset management consultancy, and we do risk solutions. I'm also the chair of the Property Sector Charter Council Research Committee, and I'm the facilitator for the alignment of the new codes. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's going to be important just in a minute. That information is going to be very important. So Mashilo starts his tax shop, a consultancy business, all right? But remember, I still have a disadvantage, right? I'm competing with KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, Lightstone, IPD, Roden, yada, 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 all right? Now, you can look at all of those companies. They're predominantly white, and they predominantly have been there way before we can be allowed to participate in property. So when we walk into a room and there's a brief, that means there's a tender, because private companies also do tenders. When they're briefing us, I'm already at a disadvantage, because if they can say, let's purely work on experience. There's no way. My experience only starts in 1994. There's no way. We've got a bunch of valuers in our offices. They are black. Even them, their experiences starts 1994. Actually, it's worse, because they had to study first. That means their experiences probably start in 2000 or something like that. All right? So we're already at a disadvantage. And that disadvantage, we can't take it away. It's there. You understand? So in those instances, enterprise development says, one of the entities that is much more experienced, they can mentor, they mentor in many ways. Either mentor in terms of sharing, bringing them as subcontractors or whatever it is on same projects. All right. So if you are an estate agent and you are lucky enough to get a development, 200 units, you might say, okay, out of the 200, I'm going to take the 10, give it to a small estate agency so that I can allow them to at least get to learn what they're doing. That's what is it about, enterprise development. Social economic development, we all know about it, is CSI. And then the reason why you have that 7 is because I was mentioning the issue of entry into any industry. The reason why you have those 7 elements is deliberate. It says that at an entry level, there's poverty. I'm Mashilo, I'm in a shack, I have no hope in life. All right? So the reason why I said BBBEE is not about ownership, it's not only about reverse race. It says, at the bottom of the bottom, the only way you can assess to allow people to participate is with CSI. It's one of the elements, socio-economic development. Right? Because those people have no ability to engage the economy by themselves or to economically participate by themselves. All right? And they might not even have means to go and acquire education or something like that. Right? So because of that, the way that last element of socio-economic development is to deal with the poverty barrier. Because there's a poverty barrier. I'm going to worry about my stomach before I worry about whether I need a degree or not. So the socio-economic development element, it's meant to deal with that poverty barrier. You need to move people out of poverty. Those that know Maslow's law of needs, it says right at the bottom, it's your basic needs, your primary need, the need for food. Come is the need for shelter. Right? Then higher you go. And then right at the top is aspirational needs. Right? You start being fancy. You start buying 7 cars. You start no longer shopping at Woolies, you now shop in Perrier. So at the basic level, that basic, the need for food, the need for survival, that's why you've got that element. It says that as enterprises in the economy, it would be bad that we grow, but we leave people at the bottom. right? So that's why companies like Woolies, companies like Checkers, companies like Pick and Pay, they have CSI, and all companies do, because that's a way of giving back to those that can't do for themselves. Then below that, now I'm okay. Food is in my stomach. You know, they say teach a man to fish and not give him a fish. Now I says I need to teach you how to fish, right? Then that's the skills barrier, right? Because if I'm trying to teach you to fish whilst you're hungry, you're probably not listening, right? So I need to first make sure that I deal with your hunger problem. Then you listen, right? But a hungry teacher cannot teach a hungry child. Those were the 80s, right? A hungry teacher cannot teach a hungry child. Because now we're dealing with our poverty problem. We're both hungry, what. That's why you get these feeding schemes in schools. They come up out of those things, that you can't have a hungry teacher and then a hungry child, and they are both standing in front of each other trying to convince each other. They're getting nowhere. So that becomes very important. So then we've got a skills barrier. Now I've got my stomach is okay, dealt with, and I start having aspirations to say, you know what, I don't want to rely on Woolies and Checkers and Pick and Pay forever. I need to start making a life for myself. And how do I do that? The skills barrier, it's one of the reasons why we're here. We start opening the door. Because one thing about education, irrespective of whether the pass mark is 40% or whatever, one thing about education is that it makes you know how to engage. Unless there was half of, not even half, 80% of the people that you call friends, you met them because of school or because of schooling. I don't say you met them at school. I said you met them because of schooling. Because if you do not go to school, you wouldn't have got the education you got. If you didn't get the education you got, you wouldn't have got to the varsity you went. If you didn't go to the varsity you went, or wherever you went, you wouldn't have got into the job where you are. You wouldn't have got to the career where you are. So if you go and check the collection of the people that you met that have given you opportunities in life, some of them are families, yes, we agree, but majority are people you met because one day you decided to enter a classroom. And that's what that deals with, skills development. Including the fact that today we are here, some of you are going to exchange business cards, whatever. Once you have dealt with the skills barrier, now I'm skilled, I've worked for whatever. I used to work for a red bank. I must be careful, sometimes, because somebody's bond was denied and then I have to do. So now that I've got the skills, I've worked, I've got the experience, I feel that, you know what, my experience is enough that I can go out there and take on the world by myself, right? I've been in property for a long time. I've got the skills to be a salesperson. I've done broking, I've done whatever. I can open my own estate agency business. That's the business barrier, right? So remember, I cannot move from being an employee to be a businessman. There are certain skills that I don't have to be a businessman. So when you're an employee, there's a certain set of skills that you are required to have. To be a businessman, there's a certain set of, it's a Women's Month, sorry. Can I apologize? To be an entrepreneur, not a businessman. Women will kill me if I leave it. To be an entrepreneur, there's a certain set of skills that you must have and possess. But some of them are not natural. Nobody's born an entrepreneur. Right? You have to be in an environment that allows you to be an entrepreneur. So for me to move from being an employee to be an entrepreneur, there are a certain set of skills I must acquire. And that's the barrier that I must cross, right? And to cross that barrier, which is why you have preferential, as I was saying, and enterprise development. People must start buying stuff, must believing that the product that I'm giving them is good enough that they can buy, you understand? At the same time, things like, I must set up accounting system, I set up that. I might not have the knowledge to do that, because as an employee, I don't have to worry about, I just need to arrive at the office, switch on a computer. As an entrepreneur or as a business person, I need to go and buy the PC. I need to go and buy the software. I might not have that skill. Understand? So then I might have to go into a mentorship with Microsoft. Says, we'll help you. That's why you'd see even banks, they've got the small business department. They deal with you differently from the way they deal with the large companies, because they know there are certain things that you don't know how to do. In those departments, you go small business department, you'll find that they teach people how to do their accounting, their books, and that's part of enterprise development because it helps me overcome that business barrier. All right. And then once I'm now sharp, 2 years, 3 years. They say most businesses die within 2 years. So I don't know if that's true, but now I've passed the barrier, that business barrier that I'm now surviving. People are buying from me, they're selling from me. The problem that you have to deal with, right, is if you're good enough as a business, right? They say the biggest danger of any business is too quick a success. Is that true? Right? So you need to be taught how to deal with success. Every person starts a business to be successful, but the most difficult thing to deal with is success. Imagine I start a consulting business today. Okay? We've got our own consulting business. It's called Tsebo Real. And that consulting business, imagine day one when we arrived, right? We get an order, 100 million, boom. I'll probably be smiling, right? I'll be the happiest man ever. But chances are, I wouldn't have the capacity to deliver that order. And the capacity is not ability. There's a difference. Right? So a consulting business arrives, and I'm trying to think a size of a job that's 100 million. All right, they say go and investigate the establishment of a underground rail system, a fast train rail system between Cape Town CBD and the airport. All right? It's a nice business. But for me to deliver that business, I may have to acquire partners. I may have to bring people on board. Because at the stage that I am as a business, I may not have the capability to be able to deliver that. I might be able, but not capable. All right. So it is very easy to fail in that instance, because your ability is not necessarily translate to your capability to deliver. So you still need support. That's why at the very top, all right, most small businesses do not have boards, right? So that's why I said you may need that capability. That capability, that means is you start to set up a board. What's the purpose of the board? It's governance. So that tomorrow you don't wake up, front page, Sunday Times, Mashilo, child, 100 million. No, that's why I buy Sunday Times. I want to read who child what. You understand? It might not have been intentional. I'm not saying people that chow money, they're doing it unintentional. I'm saying it might not have been intentional. The fact of the matter is, in my life, I've never seen so many zeros. And all of a sudden, I see so many zeros. And something here starts saying, they say people have one angel, and the guy on the left starts saying, remember that X5 that you always wanted? It's whispering. And the guy on the right saying, you have a project to deliver. And he says, don't forget the trip to London. You have a project to deliver. All right. And all of a sudden it's like you start calculating. No. You are alone. You don't have no advice from nobody. Because that's what, remember you're an employee and you just started a business. You're thinking like an employee. Right? Because employees think in a different way from, understand? So I'll make it, man. My profit is going to be this. I'll make it. X5. Project starts and you run out of 500,000 and it's the X5. So you need that. So these things deals with those things. So you start setting up boards. That's why I'm saying you need support. You start to set up a board, and a board purpose is to make sure that you take care of yourself. You understand? And then you go into a partnership with other businesses. You say, okay, this is 100 million. You know what? Instead of delivering this, I'm going to ask somebody to partner with, so that then I'll have now, instead of taking this 100% as a project that I do, I'll go to partner with Joe Soap, and then he'll take 50%, and both of us will deliver it. All right? That's what deals with ownership and equity. Mr. Ackerman, when he started his business, of course, he wanted to And we're closer to a break. You know? Of course, we wanted to, like 15 minutes to a break. And I'm going to do this section and we're going to do a break. That we would have done with section 1. So, of course, you'd have wanted to grow as big as you can. All right? But even him, if day one, he had his supermarket in the corner, day one, some large entity rocks up and says, we want to order 10,000 gallons of milk from you. He's going to have to figure out, where do I get 10 gallons of milk in the middle of, I don't know, was it called Western Cape all the time? No, it had a different, provinces had different names then. No, I'm saying the province, what was it? It was called Cape Province. Cape Province, yeah. No, this Western Cape, Eastern Cape thing, it's a, yeah, Cape Province. Nowhere, hey, 10,000 gallons of milk in the whole of Cape Province was not possible. You understand? So you had to figure out those things. That's why you start bringing partners to help you figure out these things. All right. And I just need to check. Is everybody now comfortable that, you know, their understanding of BE is what they used to know, and those that never used to know it that way, they're beginning to, all right? I'm worried about those guys at the end there. No. Are we comfortable that now yeah. Have I managed to answer some of the questions that you have had before you arrived here? Comfortably. All right. Okay, I'm happy if I've managed to do that. Okay, because that's what the intention is supposed to be, to make you understand what it is. So this is quick, and the reason I'm saying it's quick is because most of you in this room already know this, that the property sector is divided into 3. It's commercial, residential, and it's called zoned land, because that's how we differentiate the property sector from the agriculture. All right. We deal with zoned land, agriculture deals with farms. All right. It's a bit difficult when you are in this province because some of the farms are on the border of whether commercial or, yeah. So we'll live with that. It's unique to this province. And maybe the people from Mpumalanga. All right? So we did a study, and that's why I mentioned the issue of being a head of research for the chairperson for research committee for the property sector charter. It's because we do 2 studies. Okay, the one study was, it was done, I think it was released 2013. It was called Size of Market. Okay, and what it did prior to that study, nobody else. There were many studies that were released about the size of South African market, yada yada, but nobody had ever done a consolidated. So somebody would have done something on residential, they would have done something by land affairs on land, and yada, but nobody had ever done a consolidated study of all of the South African property sector. So this was the first, and I can say proudly, still the only one. Right. To an extent that once the study was released, in the State of the Nation address of 2013, the president, together with when they did the budget for 2013, this number was mentioned because all of a sudden it started to become a very important number in the country. Now, South Africa's got many sectors, you know, in mining, agriculture, manufacturing, and in the top 10, where do you think, after we have done this study, where do you think in the top 10 it places the property sector? Those that says second and third, on the dot. So this is the point I was making right at the beginning. That's why I always start by saying, let's debunk the myth about BEE, right? It's because here's an industry that prior to us doing this study, nobody cared whether it exists or not. We know there's houses, people buy houses all the time. We know people build factories all the time. So what? We want manufacturing. We want mining, right? And everybody else forget that the underlying thing that drives all of these is property. So we do a study. After doing a study, we realized that economically, the property sector is the second largest, third if you start to include the fact that IT did their study and they became second, All right, so we always don't want to concede the third. That's why I always say 2, 3. Sector in the country. And from that date on, Minister of Human Settlement, and you can hear the noise. Every year there's a noise. These guys are not transformed. Because you know what? If you're on top of the tree, the wind blows the most there. Nobody cares about a sector that's number 10. You know what I'm saying? The reason why everybody makes noise about tourism, they make noise about mining, they make noise about property, they make noise about manufacturing, is that's your top 5. And you can't be at the top branch and you expect not to be hit by the wind. When you hit by the wind, you complain and says, you see now these politicians, they're making too. We're in the top branch. We're going to be hit by the wind like mad. So, and residential at 3 trillion, it's 70% of the market is residential. So that's why you hear so much noise from human settlements, which is responsible for residential, about transformation in the residential sector. In actual fact, if you remove residential and you make it a sector by itself, so you take it out of the property sector, right? Residential by itself will be in the top 5. By itself. It will be the 5th biggest sector economically in the country. You're going to be hit by the headwinds. All right. And we'll go into that. So we're revising the study. We're probably going to release a revised report sometime now, September-ish. All right? Because the last one was 2013. Every 2 years we revise it. And then we expect, I know non-residential, which is commercial, is at 1 trillion. To that number, I can say 1 trillion. If the study comes out, it's not 1 trillion, give me a call. But it's 1 trillion. Residential has moved, substantially. I think it's substantially. We struggled with the public sector for obvious reasons, and public sector is made up of local authorities, provincial, national government, and SOEs, and we took a decision when we did the initial study that we'll fix that problem when we do the revision. That's why you've got a question mark there, because we have managed to fix 80% of that problem. But the number that we've got is based on those that could publish their financial statement, which is your 6 metros, plus we took the top SOEs. We only took the top SOEs. The rest, they're too small, right? And then zone land, as I mentioned. That's why government is unknown. So the non-residential, it's about 1 trillion. I know the number is 1 trillion. And then residential is expected to increase by 30%, so it's closer to 4 trillion, right? And then zoned land, it remained the same, right? And then, so that's what I was saying about the focus is to fix government, which is the public sector, in those numbers, and to make sure that, all right. So in 2014, and that number is going to be very important when you do the stats, when you come back, there were 52 billion rand transaction in the residential sector, 52 billion. If you take out commission, averaged about 5%, you end up there, right? Now you'll see when we do the stats is that 70%, if you look at the population of South Africa, all right? Remember my example, the 100 and the 10. It's going to be very important. 70%, closer to 80%, I must say, it's Africans. And then about less than 10% is white, and between it's Indians and colored, right? If you look at the representation of that, and you don't want to replicate, and I'll tell you why you don't want to replicate, is because we have 20 years to make up the 20 years. So the only way you can replicate is you fire somebody and you replace somebody, and then we're all upset, right? So you don't want to do that. So 70% of the residential sector, if we look at the estate agents, you'll see the stats when you come back from a break, is that it's white, you understand? And the rest is everybody else, right? You cannot switch that number like this. If your mind says the expectation is to do that number like this, it's not possible. It's not practically possible. And I'm being frank with you, right? But it is not sustainable to have that number in that fashion. All right? Because then you're going to hear some of the noise that you're hearing that are happening. It's because that representation looks unfavorable to both me and both you. All right? So that the cake needs to be shared equitably. when you run that race, as I said, you already had I used 20 years because I was using me. But that race, it's longer than that. I mean, National Party came to power in the 40s. You understand? So that 70% is a subject of that history. And you can't just erase it in 5 years. There's no way. You can't erase that much amount of history in a short space of time. Right? So, but we have to together go on the journey to say, how do we make sure that it's balanced and it's fair? Because BEE is about fair participation. All right. This is tax contribution. So what do we contribute to the economy as the sector? The first line is direct. If you take expenditure, buying boards, doing whatever in residential, that's the expenditure. The second one is how much we contribute to the GDP. That's direct contribution. It's 101 billion. And then what we contribute to taxes is about 46.5 billion. That's what the property sector contribute for taxes. Residential contribute half of that. And in which comes to about 123 billion if you include the direct expenditure. That's contribution to the economy. All right. So we're talking about the population. South African population, predominantly black, African, and then and the reason I say predominantly black is because if I take black as is defined by the broad-based black economic empowerment legislation is Africans, Indians, and coloreds, all right? So it's predominantly black, right? And African in particular. The reason I'm saying that is because you'll note when you see the stats is that more than 70% of the South African population is African, right? And it's followed by colored and Indians. And then it's a white population, right? It's something close to 10%, okay? So the statistics is very important because in the context in which when we talk about black economic empowerment as a growth and a development strategy, right? It means that for us to allow everybody else to participate, we have to understand where the opportunities are. Because BEE is about economic opportunities. It's about making sure that when we make the cake to be bigger, everybody else can be able to participate in that particular space. All right. So if we have a segment of the population which is 70% excluded from participating in the economy, that means you are excluding 70% participation in the economy. Now, you might ask, why am I saying 70% as opposed to saying 90%? It's because economically, there were different participations that were allowed by legislation, right? In terms of different segments of, and we're going to go into residentials in particular because the numbers are about residential, all right? So, given those different, I mean, for those that grew up in South Africa, you know you had the House of Representatives. It is the only group that never had a single representation anywhere, whether in parliament, whatever. We know the other ones where there were fake representations, let's accept that, were Africans, right? They had the total exclusions. Now you'd imagine that, and we'll go through the issue about women, right? So women were the most affected. Women in general, right? Women in general were the most affected by South African history. It has nothing to do with color. It has everything to do with disadvantage. And you'll notice that BEE specifically targets women as a segment, and it targets youth and disabled people. Because BEE is about targeting people who are disadvantaged by legislation and circumstances. All right. Which is my last myth, number 5, that I said I'll share with you. I said 5. That BEE is about dealing with those people that pre-1994, they were economically disadvantaged in whichever form that they were disadvantaged. All right. And women are that segment, irrespective of race, that were disadvantaged. Deliberately, women were disadvantaged because they were not allowed to do certain jobs. Right? So what it means is, you are excluding their economic participation. And the reason why this sector, particularly, not only in South Africa, everywhere else in the world is predominantly female. There's a reason for it, why it's predominantly like that. But in South Africa, there's also another reason why it's like that. So the statistics reveals those things, all right? And you'll see, when I go through the slides, as I was saying, I'm not going to go through each slide. I will share the numbers, and you'll see as I go through, you'll pick up the numbers that I was talking about, right? And that's the white number I was talking about, say 10%, it's 8.9. So the first number is 2006, the next number is 1992. I don't know what's happening with maybe it's the guys that went to Australia. That's why it moved from 9.2 to 8.6. No. So it becomes very important that we deal with that number and we deal with those issues to say, how do we make sure that it's representative? Because the other statistics that we have shared was that 2006 to 2009 predominantly is the black diamonds that were driving the market. But that predominance was they were acquiring stuff, right? The same applies that for the last 3 to 5 years, predominantly it's black township properties that are dominating the market. Very little knowledge about property, and I'm not embarrassed about it. Very little knowledge about property, right? But they know that you need to own property to get somewhere, right? So we're all acquiring. At some point in time, the very same group of people, I'm one of those people who are called black diamonds because I bought my house in 1994. 1994, no, I'm lying, 2004. I don't have a trust fund. I couldn't have started working and buy a property. So 2004, right? I still have my original property, okay? At some point in my life, I'm going to sell, right? Now, being black as I am, the way in which I engage property with the knowledge that I have, excluding the fact that I'm no property, there's a lot of us who don't know property, right? So don't take the fact that I know property into account, but just assume that I don't. At some point in time, when we decide, those guys that entered the market, they'll want to exit because they want to buy into bigger houses. They want to move on into bigger things, all right? We all do that. On average, people hold property for 6 or 7 years and they on-sell. 10 years, the most, all right? Which is why mine is 10 years. I'm very close to saying, hey, I can make a bit of money out of it. So what the mindset that they're going to go through is different, right? The way they will engage that selling process is going to be different. They might have different conditions, right? Commission rate might be the least of their worries, right? But the mannerism or the type of agent they're dealing with might be the most important, right? Because we are different by nature, not by race, by nature. So we cannot then engage the environment as if it has not changed. So when those people are now going to exit the market, they're going to engage that exit in a different way, right? So I might decide that I'm going to sell my property. In selling my property, I might insist that I want to know what you as an agent or agency have done for whatever, for society. I might say that as a condition, irrespective of whatever commission you want. You might say, no, go 3%. I say, no, it's fine. You can go 3%, or you can go, I can even give you 10% if you want to. But I want to know what you're doing for society. Because some of certain cultural groups value society more than being an individual. And it might be a condition, right? And traditionally, black people hold property longer, time-wise, longer. And they hold property through generations. So I got a question. I was doing a presentation, similar presentation in Joburg. I got a question around, we sold a property to so-and-so, and then all of a sudden they are building cottages in the same yard. I said, so what's wrong? And this person looked at me and said, no, but you can't just build. I said, no, I can. I can. So that is why you'd see, even in the legislation, they're now introducing, now even the banks themselves are introducing products where they are financing back rooms. Right? So it becomes important to understand these things because when we engage these numbers, right, we don't engage in the numbers because you see the challenge with BE is when people engage these numbers, they says, yeah, no, you see, we've got 70% Africans and then we must change. No, no. Why should I do the share? The challenge is all of those people that were buying between 2006 and 2009, and all of the township properties that are driving your commission now, all right, at some point it's going to be a reverse. All right? You need to learn how to engage it. Okay? And the only way to learn how to engage it is to be able to engage people who understand that environment. I can tell you now, if my grandmother passes away, somebody's going to probably, one of the aunts, whatever, is going to probably want to sell the house, right? Believe you me, they'll refuse to deal with a white agent. Guess who owns the estate agency in my street or across the road, because we're on the main road. I'm from Soweto, right? It's SIF, right? It's not a race thing. It's because the generation that my grandmother and my aunt grew up in distrust white, right? Because they have no knowledge of, I had the advantage, I went to university with white students, so I know how to engage with you. Do you understand? So for them, their entire life, I'm saying zero. They've never engaged with a white person. They don't know how to engage with that person. They don't know how to have a conversation with that person. So where is it going to start? When she's 90 years old, it's not going to happen. So the statistics, when you look at them, look at the statistic in that light to say, what does this mean? Hence, earlier this morning I said, it's not sustainable. Because that lot that is called black diamonds, I can tell you without a doubt, I swear, I can do this. Maybe not in Stellenbosch, but I can do this. That 90 to nearly 100%, or 99%, at least let me allow 1%, of all new developments that were done between 2003 and now, predominantly the buyers were black. Why would I make such a statistic so confidently? It's because even the population numbers support that. So it's not possible. If you go and look at the number of transactions that supports that 52 billion, right? It's millions of transactions. Each white person in this country has to buy a second or a third house for them to support those number of transactions. It's just not possible. So if I take the total population, I'm saying the whole country, including kids, right? And I take the transaction that happened in 1 year, right? You would have to, even the kids had to buy a house for you to support that number. So somebody must be buying this stuff. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so when you read the statistics and they say 70% this, 70% that, read it in that light. So if the statistic says 81% of all transactions, of all agents, even transaction matches that number, you'll get to it now, happens between Gauteng, Western Cape, and KZN. Listen, but by its very nature, right, it's true. And this is where majority of this stuff I'm talking about, new developments, happens, right? Because nobody is doing the old traditional 1,000 square meter and a 80 square meter house in the middle. Nobody, very few people does that. So when we talk about 81% of the share that drives this industry, we need to be able to say the composition of that 81%, is it sustainable? Because if you look at the statistics that are being released in terms of urbanization, more than nearly 60 to 70% of the population will be in urban areas. So this number might go to 90% to whatever, but then as it grows, we need to figure to say that what is the representation of the agents that make up that? And whether we as agents, we find it sustainable. It worked. I'll tell you why it worked, that number, and it works now. It's because most of us as Africans and most of us as Indians, most of us as colored, we are moving into white areas, inverted commas, right? So the migration is that way, right? It's not this way, and that we must accept. So when you go into those areas, if I move into Edenvale, the agent that I'll deal with in Edenvale or in Bedfordview, it's a white agent, and it's natural because that's traditionally a white area, all right? But as the population of Edenvale changes, because more of us are moving there, because look, money has no color. Let's all agree, money has no color. If two clients arrive, bank approves them, one gives me an offer 1.5, the other one gives me an offer on 1.2, I really don't care. I'm going to take the one at 1.5, all right? If they pay the same commission, money has no color, right? And our lack of knowledge says that we generally tend to overpay for things because we don't know much, including cars. We found out after that we've just overpaid. And it's just our lack of knowledge as blacks. Because we don't have the experience of these things. I didn't grow up my parents owning property, so when somebody says to me, this property is worth 2 million, I was like, yeah, no, it is 2 million. Because you still have to educate me what's the valuation. And then I buy the property. Then the municipality sends me a document and they say, hey, you must pay rates. What is rates? But I thought I own this thing. Why do I pay you? No, you see, because you live here, you must pay municipal. No, boss. It's still education for us. And I accept it. And we all accept it. But at some point, we're going to be learned enough to engage it. And we're going to start asking the right questions. And when that time arrives, these numbers will not be sustainable. Right? Will not be. Because the more we get educated, the more we engage in this thing, is the more we begin to learn that 86% of white agents in a country of 70% black is just a recipe for unsustainability. And I deliberately did not use the word disaster because it's not disaster. It's just unsustainable. And something that's unsustainable, it means you can't keep it up for a long time, all right? But it's not going to break down. Breaking down, no, it's not. But it's just you're not going to be able to maintain it. Because capacity-wise, numbers are not going to allow you to keep it up. There's just too many black people. Right? Believe me, if every single black person decided to buy a house right now, there are not enough white people to support those transactions. Just numbers. It's not me, it's numbers. So it's not sustainable. So we need to begin to say, how do we make sure that there is this broader participation so that we can all grow together? Because that's what BE is about. You know. So when you look, and that's why the numbers are there. I can repeat them for you. I can say it was 86% in 2011, it's 87% in 20. The number of agents have grown, it has gone up to whatever. All right? No. We're getting more agents, but the percentage is getting worse. All right. So we need to be able to say, okay, how do we make it not get worse? Because this is the conversation we're having about transformation. All right? How do we make sure that, and this training is one of those things, by the way. This training is one of those things that says that, how do we create an environment where everybody else enter the sector the same way? Pre-1994, I wouldn't enter in actual fact, I wouldn't even do this training. I was not even allowed to get even close to this farm. I can't even walk on that street unless I'm a farm worker here. Or else I'll be arrested. My dad has got his dompas. Inside it's got stems, 72 hours out of Johannesburg. But he worked in Johannesburg. So for you to go and work, you had to receive a permit from your employer, and says, you're allowed. So every time police come, you give them a permit. No, I work at, he worked at Bruma Pharmacy in Seraldine. I work there. Here's my permit. Then you're allowed to walk the streets. And then once you understand that context, you can engage the numbers and say, how do we make sure that we are able to deal with that? Because believe you me, because I was head of valuations at Red Bank, Okay, I think these days they're changing to become a little bluish, but red bank, we all understand. So what that meant was, my responsibility was all valuers that did your valuation, sorry guys, this is the point where I always hope I have a bulletproof, because hey, it's like somewhere people just draw a picture of a gun in their head, or hey, here's that guy who refused my thing because, so, so I was the head of valuations, assessments, and that last leg, once they've taken you through whatever, and then we are the last leg before they go and do whatever. So when you get an approval in principles, it comes to a bunch of people that used to work for me, and then those bunch of people would say yay or nay. They would say this, and including what we called asset risk. Asset risk is the quality of the assets. We say, yeah, no, we can see the value is right, but you're not going to finance this thing at that. No, if this guy default and at that, no, don't go there. And then a number of people got upset. So there's a number of developments that I know that are taking place where some of the farms, right, are being converted. There's one down the road from here. It's got sort of, I don't know, colors. Men in general are colorblind, but the colors looks like the back of that wall. And then they're doing a nice development down somewhere here in Stellenbosch, and then it's a sectional title or whatever scheme, and it's got a nice gates and what. You know what I'm talking about, those that have the opportunity to operate there. And I said, so even in this environment, some of the guys have realized, oh, I've got this big farm, I'm not Simmonsburg, I'm going to do sectional title, right? There's lots of conversions that are happening in Stellenbosch CBD. Understand? So there's those kind of interesting things that are happening, all right? It's about how do I engage those things, you understand? Because whether you like it or not, like I said, there's just too many of us, we're going to be everywhere. Everywhere. There was a reason why we were given 250 square meters. Because if you allowed us to have 1,200, where would we be? I mean, let's be honest. We'll take up the whole country. So the only way is to squeeze us into a small space, because then we can fit in. And 1994 came and we realized, yeah, ne. I'm trying to find an African way to say I can stay in Stellenbosch. If I get it, I'll tell you, yeah, ne. A movie. I want to be staying in 250 square meters with 10 other kids. I grew up in a house where there were 10 kids, but we didn't have a choice. We can always be stuck in there because nobody is not allowed to go anywhere. And unfortunately, I was the only boy. Everybody in the family was women, and then women were not allowed to rent property from government. The only person who was allowed was my grandfather. He was the only man. So they were stuck. I was too young. I can't ever rent. So we're all stuck in a house, 10 of us. When I said triple disadvantages, we're stuck. Women were not allowed to own property. Right? Wrong? Am I right? Sorry, I'm not working like a comedian. You're just too close. We're not allowed. All right? So guess what? When 1994 comes, what happens to the rest of everybody that are being stuck? They're like, we're moving out. And we all moved out somewhere. And if you're in Joburg, you go north. Everything happens in the north. Right. So the nature of the fact that this industry is predominantly female is because of the things that I'm mentioning now, about the fact that women were not allowed to participate in certain economic activities. So we accept that naturally. It also is the nature of the job. Estate agency business is one of those jobs in which you can freely do many other things. If you are in Bedfordview, you pick up kids and you are the agent as well. You have one. Unfortunately, if you are male, black or white, when you start knocking on people's gate, you're either selling milk or you're a criminal. So that's why sometimes the state agency is suitable for women, because at least, even if I don't know you, see, men were weak. If a lady knocks at my gate, I don't care what color you are, I'm going to go to the gate and try and talk to you. If a guy knocks at the gate, he's like, what do you want? Are you a plumber? I didn't call a plumber. So I'm making it sounds funny, but there's a natural thing about it that this industry will, black or white, predominantly, not only South Africa, be female. But we need to be able to say, as white females, how do we allow other females and other people to participate? Equally so. In as much as my aunt wants to pick up kids and them in between, she can go sell houses and so on, to let her do that. Yeah, one. But now she has to compete with Sif across the road. It's like an impossible battle. And this type of training are those things where we're saying we want to level the playing field. You're removing a natural disadvantage that person has suffered. All right. I mean, you can see the number. I mean, it's shocking. You know? So they say decisions in families, particularly families that are where there's when I say families, I'm talking where there's a mother and a father. All right? Because you see, with African families, and I'll recap to you in a second, is that there's a slight difference. Is that decisions are made by the mother. The dad behaves like he was part of the decision, but he was outvoted anyway. So they say, let's vote in the house, and there's 2 hands that the mother raised, and he's like, you can raise 2 hands. You raise 1. Then they say the majority rules. All right. So black females as well, all right, have the greatest stake in deciding where we live. Right? I didn't move to Pretoria because I wanted to be in Pretoria. And I bought a house. Before I got married, I bought a house in Bedford View because I wanted to live in Bedford View. You'd imagine that my dad worked in Cyril Dean for a long time. So my exposure to suburbs was Bruma, if you know Gauteng. Bedford View is next to Bruma, right? So my exposure to suburb is that area. You understand? So I grew up saying, this is a nice, lekker area. So when the opportunity comes to buy a property, naturally I'll be inclined to go there. The same way, if you grow in a house where everybody is an accountant, you are likely to become an accountant. Likely. Doesn't mean you will, likely. And 9 out of 10, if you have 3 kids, one of you is going to be an accountant, if not 2. Right? So that's why I end up in Bedford View. So it happens that the person I ended up getting married to works in Pretoria, and then like I said, he has to drive between Bedford View and Pretoria, and eventually it's like, this is not working. And all of a sudden, we're looking for houses in Pretoria. Before I know it, I wake up in Centurion. Only thing I can say is, hey, I don't know what happened. You understand? So when we look at the statistics of that representation, it talks to that, to say that majority is not sustainable. So we have to deal with it at some point. Because I can tell you, women everywhere, black or white, behave the same. There's no woman who wants to be told by another woman what to do. Am I right or wrong? That's it. Men are different, black or white. We pump fist and we go, no, it's okay, my brother, let's sort it out. You understand? So that's the natural thing. We fight in a different way as men. You understand? And we're able to, we can work out something out of a bad situation. We can work out something. And we're comfortable with it. We work it out. Let's work it out. It's cool. Except in sport. We don't work out anything. If you're blue bulls, we're blue bulls. I'm Stormers, I'm Stormers. And let's kill each other about it. Eh? They used to wear the colors, and they still do wear the color that I like most, which is black. You might ask why I'm not favoring the Sharks. Because they also wear black, right? 100%. I don't like swimming. So I can't associate with anything that has to do with swimming. So that's it. No, I'm not a pirate supporter. How can I be? I don't support dead people. They still are dead people. They're like sharks, water, pirates, black, dead people. Dead people, pirates, no. Sharks, water, black, no. I'm a Chiefs fan. Hey, red, boss, and white. Jesus, man. I'm very sure that countries that has white on their flag, right, are mostly white countries, European. And maybe Japan. No, red and white, hey, we want to play dirty. And white is one of those colors that, I can't play dirty in white. Eh? AX is too pure, it's too clean, you know. When you're wearing white, it's like, because our parents, when you grow up, when you're wearing white, you're not allowed to play. She knows. You see the way she's laughing. They dress you in white. Boss, you better come back sparkling clean. Or else you're going to get a... Why do you have a spot? So yeah, it's a historical thing, boss. It's not a race issue. It's just, hey, I can't be clean all the time. So it becomes very important that when we look at the statistics, that says 90% of a sector that you operate in is predominantly white female, right? There's no female. I can tell you right now, right? We looked for a house probably for 6 months. We had an agent. My wife found this agent. It was a lady. 6 months. We look. And eventually I said to her, hey, you know, it doesn't, every time when we look, there's something that you don't like. We walk into a house, it's just, I don't like how those curtains hang there. That thing we need to take us up, but it's gonna, we walk in another house, I don't like that kitchen. I don't like that. By a stroke of a genius, we met a guy called George, still a friend of mine. He was in one of these training in Joburg. We met George. And it took us 3 weeks. We bought. Right? Because I can engage with George and there's camaraderie between me and George. We talk, and the wife can do what she does and she's finished. When she comes back and says, I don't like the curtain, and George says, no, it's fine, we can just take it away. You know what I'm saying? Because men engage women differently. We are too soft. Like I say, lady knocks at the gate, I'll go running. Hey, you know what, George, this, I don't want to remember. You know what we will do with this kitchen? You don't like the top? No. I'll ask the owner to just lift the top, we take it away. And what kind of a stove would you like? No. Oh, I know what it is. Then he whips out a picture and says, you know, this stove, it's much better than the one you talk about. You understand? Because the conversation is different, all right? The reason why we struggled with ladies is because between my wife and the lady agent, when they say the curtain is skewed, now they are going to be technical about the curtain. And they now must debate their taste around the curtain. And somewhere, she's boiling in her head. She's thinking, who's she to tell me what I want? That's the 6 months, all right? I'm just sharing to say that for you, then, you need to then go through a journey. And I'm saying you because predominantly this room, by representation, it represents the statistics as well. All right? I'm not sure if you noticed. So that's why I was not reading the statistics, because you don't have to read the statistics and be angry for you to know what is true. You just need to observe your environment, right? I did this training in Joburg, Durban, yada. And the statistics confirms what the statistics say, so I can read them and repeat them to you. But that's not the point about BE. The point about transformation is about how do we begin to make sure that this bias, because it's a bias, we allow other people to come in. And we can have a debate later on, right, around how do we begin to change this, right? And there's a lot of suggestions and questions about, no, you know, we try to do some training, and every time we bring black students, the challenge that we have is because they need transport, they need this, they need that, so as a result, we cannot deal with it. You know? The issue is, it is something that you have to deal with. You can try and hide your head in the sand. For the next, my assumption, if I'm wrong, somebody correct me, my assumption is, for the next 5, 10 to 20 years, your seller in the market, maybe not in the Western Cape, because unfortunately, for my friends in the south, you lag behind by a couple of miles. No? No, I can tell you now, if you go to Joburg, people are building like mad. It's like mad, mad. When I say mad, like there's cranes all over. All right? So that thing still has to be absorbed into the market first. Right? But the reason why I'm saying you're behind is because we have had the advantage of 2006, 2007 more than any other province. Right? Because while we're having a party with primary residents in 2006 to 2009, you were having a party with holiday homes. Right? And holiday home is like the second car. When trouble comes, I get rid of that first. But primary residence is what drives the numbers that I'm talking about. Right? It's coming. It's happening. Right? So, 5 years, 10 years down the line, 20 years, the guys, the black diamonds like myself, who bought during that time, right? You can work it out. If I bought in 2006, my 10 years is coming in 2016. That means if I had a child then, my child is about 10 years old. Because most black people, and I'm giving you free research material that you aren't going to read anywhere, mostly move because their kids have to change school, or else they don't move, ever, generally. But we also don't mind transporting our kids 100 kilometers as well, every morning, if we don't want to move. So we move for different reasons, right? Predominantly. So the way in which you engage in business as well, where I still see advertisements that says to me, okay, schools are important, shops are important, yada, yada, all of those are important. But there are certain things that there's other reasons that we buy properties for, right? And which is different. Now, maybe it's a population problem, but predominantly blacks, Indian, Africans, and coloreds. And the reason I'm emphasizing this thing, because every time you say black, people think African, all right? Is that most of us, when we buy a property, we buy our first property when we are still single. Majority of us. It's something largely unique, not only unique to us, but largely unique to us. Right? I've got a friend, it's Brian. I do martial arts, by the way. So that's why I can do this presentation and talk about the Red Bank. Because I'm a first then black belt. I can take any punch for my old sins. So my friend, Brian Engelbrecht, he's got a lovely lady that they go out together. And he says, this is a God-given gift, right? And they'll probably they've been going together for a long time, but they'll probably, when they were going to buy a property, at that point, before they were married, they were together in the decision-making of that transaction to buy a property, okay? And so whatever they arrive at something that they know this is for keeps for a while and a long time, right? Unfortunately, with the blacks, it's different. When we buy properties when we are single, I decide alone. It's not because it's Mashilo. You can go ask any single person that brought a property. And for you agents that you have dealt with a black person, Indian, colored, or African, that was buying property, they probably rocked up alone. If they rocked up with some girlfriend or boyfriend, 9 out of 10, they had a conversation with you and they ignored the person. They only ask the opinion of that person when they want to check. If it's a lady, if I'm buying and I brought some lady, it's because I wanted to make sure that the kitchen is sort of right. So I ask her, hey man, is the stove okay? Yeah. The rest of the decision I'll make. If it's a lady who's buying and he brought a guy, it's because he wants the guy to check if there's nothing broken. So ask him, man, check if there are no cracks. So the person you're bringing in is not a decision maker. You're bringing them. It's like when my wife, before we got married, wanted to buy a car. She phoned me. She always worked in Pretoria. She phoned me, hey, you know what? I'm at Delta and I'm looking at this car. Do you want to just come in and tell me, just check for me if there's something wrong or if there's something I must look at? I'm not there. I don't want to convince myself I'm there as part of the decision-making process. No. I'm the mechanic. That's my role. So you need to also understand that decision-making process to be able to engage us as blacks. That what will happen is I buy my property alone. Then I have this lady. When we get married, then we decide, okay. And 9 out of 10 find that she also had her own property alone. Right? That's what black diamonds are. Right? Then we get married. Then the decision is, okay. The decision is never about, do I move to you or do you move to me? No, it's okay. Silence, pause. Where are we going to live? And what that means is we're about to buy a joint property. No. The other one is mine. The other one is yours. We're about to buy a joint property. All right. And generally, that's how we behave. You're not going to find it in some research. Actual stuff. So you need to engage that when you engage the numbers and says, my next client that I'm going to deal with, right, behaves in a different way that I do. As a result, I need to engage him in a different way than I do. And I need to engage business in a different way that I do. All right? That means the next client, 5 to 10 years down the line, will be slightly more sophisticated and educated about property, that he might ask you questions that you might not know about. And that's what transformation in BE is about. It's about exposing people, hence the ladder. You understand? So when I bought my first property, it was by accident purely. I can tell you the story during a break if you want to, but it was purely by accident. But I knew I wanted to buy a property. Good bargain. Right? But purely by accident. I was bored on a Sunday, went around, walking around, and because naturally they call it a professional property practitioner. That means you do research, whatever. So on weekends, I drive around, read papers about property, yada yada. So bumped into a house, and some guy was bored, says to me, do you want to put in an offer? And it was a bit irritating, so I said, this guy, let me get out of my hair. Yeah, here's an amount. Take this. Some ridiculous amount. I think this thing was selling at 500, and I said 250, some funny number like that. I just wanted to get rid of it because he was too much into my hair. Lo and behold, Sunday afternoon, sitting at my house, 2 hours later, your offer has been accepted. Yeah? It took me a year before I could move into the house. Because I was not into that business. I was not into owning property and stuff like that. No. Besides, the previous owner owned dogs and carpets, and it was a problem. But it's that kind of a challenge that I had to deal with. You understand? So the kind of client that you deal with becomes that. Now, I'm presenting this thing the way I'm presenting it because I'm not dealing with principles. Because principles, we don't punch, we do whatever. Okay? It's because you're the guys most of the time in the forefront. You're going to engage with a person like me. I'm going to sell my house. And I'm going to say, okay, condition number 1. You say you work for what? Estate agency? Okay, can you please give me you work for what? Javed, Sif? Yeah? Joel Rossen? Yeah? Oh, okay. Can you please ask your principal to give me his BE certificate? I want to see it. And he says, hey, what's BEE? I said, okay, I can't do business with you. Which is why we've got codes. So what are codes? In terms of BEE legislation, right? And then I'll answer your question about the certificate just now. So BEE legislation is, when it was decided that you need to allow participation or whatever, so you set up a legislation. The legislation, you can either follow the legislation as it is. That means the DTI legislation. That's why some people will say, I follow the DTI codes, right? So you get the 7 elements. Remember the 7 elements: ownership, management control, employment equity, skills development, preferential procurement, and socio-economic development, yada, 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 all right? Enterprise development, all right? So you can either follow the DTI codes, which says to you that in terms of the legislation, all right? Or you can set up your own as an industry. Remember I said there's sectors, there's manufacturing, no. You can set up your own. The only thing is that is required is you cannot change the principles. That means you can't come up with your own definition of ownership. You can't change the principles, all right? And you cannot set up your standards lower than what the DTI has set up. So you can't say, when the DTI says under ownership we're targeting 30%, you said, no, I want to target 20. You cannot be lower than what was set nationally. You can be higher, but lower. You need to follow the same principles, right? The very last myth that I need to debunk, which is number 6, and this is the very last for the day, is that BEE is compulsory. It's not. Although it's a legislation, but it's voluntary. So many people say, if it's so important, why do you make it voluntary? It's voluntary because economic participation by its very nature is voluntary. You can't force people to start businesses if they don't want to, right? So it's voluntary. There's no way in the legislation that says you must do it. It's your choice as an organization or the organization you work for to do it. It's purely their choice. It's voluntary, right? So you're not forced to do anything. So it goes back to the point I made earlier this morning to say, some people say, no, government is forcing us to share our business. Nobody's forcing you to do it. It's voluntary. It's one piece of legislation anywhere else in the world where you choose to ignore it. I want to ignore e-tolls, but I'm very sure very soon they're going to take me to court because I'm one of those. That one. But this one is voluntary. I wish e-tolls was like this. I volunteer or I don't volunteer. It's voluntary. So if you don't want to participate, you don't participate. Right? So the BEE codes will be called the generic codes, and then you set up your own sector codes, right? And the sector codes means that you as a particular sector, and those are the sectors that has their own codes. Construction set up their own in 2009. We set up ours in 2012, all right? So if you don't have a sector code, that means a group of players in that industry come together and says, guys, we don't agree with what DTI is saying. We are going to do our own thing. We are the one of those sectors that decided to do that, to do our own thing. And we did that in 2012. All right. Okay. And then because we decided to do that, right? And that's what I was talking about. You must use the same principle, the same methodology, the same calculation. You can't now go and say, I'm going to change the definition. If it's defined in a particular way, you define it in the same way, all right? You cannot you cannot go below the measurement that you can set up your own measurements. You can increase, which is what we did in terms of the property sector. The DTI measures out of 7 elements, we added the 8th one. You can increase, you can't reduce. Right, that's the point I was making. We've got 8 elements as opposed to 7, right? And I'll share with you that, okay? All right. And these are the members that has participated. So those are all the organizations that are in the property sector. Commercial, residential, you have public works. Public works is the primary department for the property sector. And then you've got the EABs there, and then under residential, you might be a member of one of those organizations. Those that are managing agents, sectional title, NAMA is right at the bottom. And then, yeah, so at one point or another, your organization belongs to one of these organizations. It's impossible that you're in this sector, you don't belong to one of these. And these are the people that came together and set up the property sector codes that I'm going to go with you. So those are the things that they said, we in the property sector, these are the rules we'll play by when you do BEE, right? In terms of the revision, I was saying I was a facilitator, and I said later on it will come into play. Why I'm mentioning that is because when we are doing the revision now, is you have to, those people, the different organizations, because those are organizations, all right, have to set up a technical committee to do the drafting, and they have to negotiate. It's like CODESA between property players. They're negotiating amongst themselves. No, I don't like this. No, you must write it like. So I was asked to come in to become a facilitator as they're negotiating amongst themselves. It's like chairing CODESA. For those that knows CODESA, it's like chairing CODESA, and Eugene Gerald Blanche is in one side of the room, and then Modise is on the other side of the room. If you remember the late Modise, bless his soul. There were 2 diversion sides of the coin. They were on the same coin, but they were, the one side was saying 5 rand, the other one was saying 2 rand, but it's the same coin. So yeah, and then you have to try and moderate, and that's the role that I'm playing as a facilitator in terms of the revision. All right, to try and get the parties to not storm the room with a big fan. For those that remember Eugene Gerald Blanche. All right. So And then I'll take you through the codes. This is the part where I'm saying it's going to be a little bit technical, right? And I'll try and go slow, but at least still be able to make sure that you keep up. It's very, very technical. So the codes divide companies. Remember, if you remember, there's enterprise development, there's ownership, there's what, right? So it divides. That's why it divides companies into three segments. You've got large companies, and then you've got what they call them qualifying companies, and you've got small companies. Because you want to determine which companies need assistance, right? Which companies need to assist others. So large companies normally assist the smaller companies, and which companies need to be. So because you want to determine at what point of growth are organizations that needs to be supported. And then if you are going to place obligations on companies, you don't want to place an obligation on a company that's too small to even meet your obligation because it defeats the purpose. All right. That is why you'd see that EMEs are small companies, they are exempted. So you're not required to do BEE. You are exempted. So if you're, this is based on turnover. Right. Now, I'll take you through the property sector for now, because these are generic for the DTI. Those are the size that are being, but it's called the old GTI because we're going to go through the revised codes just now. So if you're a large entity, if your turnover per annum is 35 million and above, you are classified as a large company, right? And if it's between 5 and 35, you're classified as a QSE, that's a qualifying company, it's a media-size entry. And then if you do a turnover of less than 5 million, then you don't have to do BEE, all right? The 7 elements, I've gone through them. And this is how the scorecard would look like. And I'm not going to go that into detail because I need to go into the new ones in detail. So that would be the scorecard for a large company. If you're a medium-sized company, you out of the 7, you only do 4 out of the 7. You choose the 4 you want. You only do 4 out of 7. You don't do the whole scorecard. You only do 4 out of the 7 because it needs to add up to 100, all right? Whereas if I go back, large entities, you need to do all the 7s, and that's the weighting that you get in each one of those segments. So the question is, all right, that gets us, as an estate agent, am I an employee? Because estate agents are small. It's like one-man business or 2 people, so am I, in terms of BE, do I get classified as an employee, or do I classify it as a contractor? It does not matter, right? It does not matter for you whether you are classified as an employee or as a contractor. Because remember, as a contractor is like a one-man company or a small company, and then an employee, you belong to somebody else, right? So with regard to BE, it does not matter because either way, you're going to be measured somewhere. You're not going to be missed, right? You're going to be measured somewhere. So as an employee, you will be measured under employment equity or skills development because your company has to report what they're doing to upskill you or develop you. And employment equity, that means they must be able to say, where are you in the company? Are you medium size, large size, small size company? Do you understand? So they need to be able to do that. But as a contractor, they'll report you either under enterprise development or preferential procurement. So you're going to be captured somewhere. There's no way you're going to be missed. You understand? Irrespective of your status, you're not going to be missed, right? Because that's how the scorecard works. Property sector is different. Because the property sector is different not because it's different from other sectors, different by itself. So you've got, in the property sector, you've got the listed entities which are asset-based. So they don't have a turnover as well, but they've got assets, right? So you can't measure them on turnover, right? Then you've got estate agents, we don't have turnover, but they've got commission. You understand? Then you've got normal property management companies that has turnover, all right? So you have to design your codes in such a way that it accommodates everybody, it doesn't exclude anyone. So it accommodates the asset-based companies, it accommodates the management companies who have turnover, it also accommodates the commission-based companies, all right? So by so doing, what you then do is we're gonna, and you'll see, I'm gonna go to, it will come just now, that you'll have what we call a complex structure, which no other sector has but us. All right. So the DTI it's got 7, we've got 8. And you'll also see that just now, because we've added one element at the bottom. But the main reason, the primary reason why the codes were revised is purely because that government needed to focus on certain things, right? Because remember, between 2006 and 2008, the economy was booming. And one of the things that happened was, and all of us know this, that although the economy was booming, but it was not creating jobs, and it was not absorbing anybody, right? And the government says, but guys, the economy is growing, but it's not benefiting the majority of the population. So we need to find a way in which we can bring, because remember, I said it's about bringing people into the mainstream. How do we bring them into the mainstream? Unless they participate, there's no way they're in the mainstream, so they'll always be outside the mainstream. So you'll see that job creation becomes one of those, to say, we need to make sure that the economy can absorb people as it grows, right? That means job creation. And what goes with jobs creation is skills development, right? So you need skills. As you create jobs, you need to make sure that there are qualified people who can absorb those jobs. So you have so to deal with those two challenges, skills development and job creation becomes the primary focus of this revision, to deal with that, right? And if you remember the ladder, from the bottom, you get skills and you enter there, you get a job. Once you got a job, you got skills, you got experience, you start a business. Once you start a business, you move up the ladder. So that's why those two, skills development and job creation, becomes important, because that's your entry, that's your foot in the door. And once you are in the door, then you can start dealing with supplier development and localization. So localization is about making sure that when Mashilo now is skilled, is working, I've created a job for him, now he wants to start his enterprise, I must buy from him. That means I must buy local. I don't know how many people in here knows Malcolm X, but Malcolm X once said something to this nature that says that the economy where you buy, the economy where you spend your money grows faster than the economy where you're taking money away from. Right. So if I live in Soweto and I spend all my money in Sandton, right? The shopkeeper in Soweto will be poorer than the shopkeeper in Sandton. It's simple economics. Because if I'm going to buy bread, if both shopkeepers, the one in Soweto and the one in Sandton, buy 10 loaves of bread, right? And there's 10 of us, or there's 20 of us, right? If all 20 of us go and try and get bread in Sandton, right? The only way that the shopkeeper in Sandton can satisfy us is to take the price up. It's called demand and supply, right? And he's going to sell all his 10 loaves, and the guy is going to be sitting with his 10 loaves, which are going to rot because nobody's buying from him. And he's going to be poorer. And that's the economics. That's why you need people to enter. Skills and job creation becomes primary for people to enter any industry. Once they are in, you need to buy from them. So if we don't buy South African products, the economy is not going to grow, right? And if you don't buy South African products, nobody's going to employ, you understand? So the reason why Woolworths or Pick n Pay has a cashier is because you are going to arrive to buy. Now, if nobody arrives to buy at Woolworths, they don't have a reason to employ a cashier, do they? That's the point. So if you're not doing business as an agent, you have no reason to hire an admin person. Right. So that's the primary reason. Yeah, well, so you do that. You say, so then the focus becomes that, to say those becomes the 5 primary focus of the revision. That's why the revisions were called. As I said, they became effective and applicable from the 1st of May this year, but the sectors which had codes, those sectors that developed their own codes, were given a 6 months grace. That means until the 1st of November 2015, we do not have to apply the revised codes, because we were given grace to revise, to align our codes to the new codes, right? And that's the point I was making. From the 1st of November, the codes will apply. Okay, now, that's the 8 I was talking about. So, the DTI's got 7. That means the first one up to socio-economic development, the property sector came up with the last one, all right? Now, in your pack, on the screen, it happens to me that it's going to look like it's one slide. In your pack, it's like 5 slides following each other, all right? But bear with me, because I'm going to go through them quicker, but it's 5 slides with you, right? We've got 8. The economic development was put up there because economic development deals with development in underdeveloped areas. So most developments, like I was saying, most of us, when we think about buying property, we're moving north. Even all the shopping centers were in the north. Everything nice, you have to go to north. And Gauteng, you move north. I don't know here where you move. But Gauteng, you have to move north. So in order to allow for the property sector to begin to diversify, that's why from 2000 and after these codes were set up, there was this proliferation of shopping centers in black townships. It came because of that reason, that you are now requiring companies to now begin to start developing in those areas where they wouldn't go and develop. So we had 8. The DTI had 7 previously. So I'll try and go slow. So DTI had 7 previously, and we had 8. Then when they did the revision, they reduced the 7 to 5. Because what they did, they combined management control, employment equity, and preferential procurement and enterprise development. They call it ESD. In our revision, we're going to have 7. And one of the reasons why we are going to have 7 is because of the same reason that gentleman was asking about estate agents and asset-owning companies. Because in our industry, we cannot combine management control deals with corporate governance. It's like your voting rights, your boards, and what, all right? Employment equity deals with different levels of in the company, junior, what. Estate agents or residential is one of those sectors where you don't have different levels. So you can't combine the two. So we had to allow that to be separate because we don't have that. Although the property management companies have got different levels, estate agents don't. Those estate agents only have management control, which is governance, right? They don't have the employment equity. That's why in ours it was separated. You have seen this. This is the old codes. The property sector is at the bottom, and this is where your question comes in, all right? You'll see there's a residential sector as the last block, right? Because you're dealing with commission, your EME, your required numbers are different. They're much lower than what was required. So in terms of the DTR, if you look at the above, they require 10 million as your exemption level, which is turnover, all right? Because we don't deal with turnover, we deal with commission, all right? So residential, their exemption level is 2.5 million of commission, all right? That's your exemption level. When you do less than 2.5 million, you are exempted from complying. Right. And then the asset-based companies, which are the listed companies, they have assets. Remember, asset-based companies, we run an asset management companies. There's probably, 5 of us in the office? Or 4, if I exclude the 2 consultants. You understand? So we don't have staff. So asset-based companies do not necessarily have staff. So even them, they don't have the employment equity different levels because we don't. At the same time, we also don't have turnover. We don't have turnover. I mean, consultancy, we don't have turnover. So the way that you are measured as if we had to go deal with an asset-based company, it's based on their asset, their balance sheet. And it's still the same. It works out the same because that 400 million is turnover of 50 million, less 20% of expenses at a yield of 9%, then it gives you 400. So it works out still based on that 50 million so that you make it equitable. And these are the new codes in terms of the scorecard. So the first column would be, that's why I said in your book, it will go through via a number of pages, all right? Because it's taking through, it's doing what, you see, technology is nice. It's doing this. So that's, for you, that will be 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, before you get to the last one. That's why I'm moving through them. So previously, in terms of the property sector charter, you'll be scored out of 107, and then the new one that's going to come out, you'll be scored out of 117. Right. And the additional element at the bottom is still there. Okay. If you are a QSE are medium-sized companies. You only have to do 4 of the, as I said, you can choose any 4 that you want. Right? Any 4 that you want out of the 7. So that it adds up to 100. And we're talking about the BE certificate. Now, obviously, you do your scoring. So you've got your codes, then you do your scoring. You go to a verification company, they do your scoring, right? And I'm not going to go into detail with this. I need to get to the scorecard because you're not going to do the scoring. You want to sell, that's it. You must come to me, I'll sell my property. Hey, but you guys are too far. So previously, what would happen is, for you to qualify to be a certain level, so if you are an EME, remember EME, I said you don't have to do a scorecard, right? That means this won't apply to an EME. As an EME, you'd have been given level 4 automatically previously. Right now, as an EME, depending on your ownership, you can be level 1, day 1, level 1, because you don't have to, understand, unless somebody else for it. So the levels are changed to an extent that if you're not careful, your old certificate before the 1 May 2015, and I'll show you an example before we close because we're going to the end, is that you might have been, let's say, level 3 because you had a 75, right? In terms of the new codes, that 75 would only make you level 5. So the codes are much stricter to those that it applies to them. Much, much stricter than they were previously for you to get to different levels. And you'll note that the emphasis is on those 5, because those 5 things are the ones that were strengthened. So that's the schedule. That schedule does not necessarily apply anymore. One thing that I know is that effective date for aligned PSC. So look at where the star is. It's in September. So I think the Gazette will come in about, you read the papers very soon, you'll see there will be a publication of the Property Sector Charter, new codes, all right, aligned codes, and those are the ones that are going to apply going forward, all right? That's where the star is. In terms of that schedule, we're there. Read the codes because they're going to apply to you going forward. As I was saying, the priority elements and the focus in terms of the skills development and that, right? And we're not going to do the group discussion because you're not going to do the codes. Your principals, which is the next session, they're going to do the code, so we will greet each other on that. The one thing that I want to close on before I show you the certificates and we off is that although I said that the legislation is voluntary, right? It is possible that, because there's one thing that is new, totally new, that's going to be set up. It's going to be called the BEE Ombuds. It's like the banking ombuds, the insurance ombuds, the public protector, one of those people. There's going to be a BEE Ombuds. And the ombuds can force you to report if you're a company or a practitioner or whoever. Because the ombuds has got the right to investigate fronting. And in those instances where he comes and says, hey, I want you to report your BEE activities, you must make sure that your organization is at a point where they are able. So when you go around your daily activities, you do transactions with companies that owns houses they want to sell, or you do transaction on behalf of a company that is doing a development, understand what's their BEE status. Because although BEE is voluntary, all right, when you engage in a transaction with other people, they might ask you, and I must confess, I'm one of those people that next time I sell my house, I'm going to ask that agent that's going to rock up, I want to see your BEE certificate. I'll insist, because I have a right to. And you might say, no, but it doesn't apply to me. No, it's voluntary. You can also voluntarily go and get verified. I'm voluntarily choosing to make you go do it. So although you might choose to say, you know what, this BE thing, waste of my time, I'm not going to do it. But the people that you do business with, it might affect them otherwise, so they might insist that you do it. So you go and you find that Absa Bank owns a portfolio of houses or a portfolio of buildings that they want to get rid of, all right? They say, we've got repossessed properties, we want somebody to go and sell them for us, but we will only appoint an agency or an agent company, all right, that has a BE certificate. If you don't have a BE certificate, we're not going to deal with you. So although it doesn't apply to you, that environment then forces you to go and get it. All right. So you also need to think of both ways of side of the coin to say, yes, it doesn't apply to me, I'm not going to do it, because it's honest. Nobody is going to force you to do it. Honestly, you can say, this thing is useless. In my life, it's never going to affect you, but you might get along clients who says, no, I'll give you my business, but I want to see what you're doing. All right, because it affects the scorecard. Absa might have a scorecard that they must keep. They chose to keep a scorecard. So if they don't keep a record of what you are doing, under their scorecard, you are affecting them badly. All right. I was talking about the new clients in the market. Now, the new clients in the market are people like myself that are going to be selling. I can talk about myself and says, I'll ask for the certificate. I will. Very soon I'll be selling my property. And the company that I've asked, and I phoned them, I asked them 2 questions. 1, do you have a black agent? Yes, we do. Can I see your BE certificate? I'm not interested in whether they have a certificate or not. I'm interested in what other activities beyond selling houses they are doing. I don't want somebody to operate in my suburb, and the only thing that they do is to take commission. I want to make sure that that agent has got vested interest. Because a person, when they have a vested interest in your suburb, they are more likely to make sure that that suburb doesn't suffer because it makes their pocket suffer. But a briefcase agent who arrives on a weekend because he dropped something in my mailbox, forget. It's not going to happen. You understand? So when we have community, I lived in these gated suburbs. They've got a security that you go through, whatever. It's not an estate. It's a suburb that is closed off. Understand? When we have community meetings or whatever, I want to see my agent there because he must know what's happening in my community, not to arrive on a weekend with a briefcase. And those are some of the things that you might say, yeah, I'm an agent. I just want to sell. No, you're dealing with a different client altogether. It's a different animal. Understand? Because if you have vested interest in my community, which is my suburb, it would mean that anything that happens in my suburb, it's also to interest because it affects your pocket. You can't just rock up with a briefcase in your pocket. No, so if in our suburb we've got on a weekend we say we've got a drive, the security company in my suburb is called Mamba. And once in a while they do one of these communities, they say we do Christmas toy collection, whatever it is. I want to see that agent that participated in my Christmas toy collection. It's neither here nor there. But it shows to me that he's much more interested in the people living in that suburb than just arriving with a briefcase. I'm not sure you're getting it. All right. And it's not a black thing. It's an interest thing. Understand? That says that if you rock up in a briefcase, you don't care. You're most interested in getting the highest price. That means that when a client rocks up, so the client arrives, I said money has no color, but sometimes you get careful. So a client rocks up, you look at this person. That's why some agents get shocked. They see their property they just sold last week on TV and they say they were collecting trust. But I just sold that property. And you're shocked that the same property you just sold is got. I didn't know they were growing dacha in the backyard. You can only know those things, those small little nuances, if you spend time with the community. Because the community is able to tell you, you don't know why that guy is selling the property. He might tell you, no, I'm relocating to the UK. Back at the ranch, he's got an underground basement where he's cooling something. You don't know. Didn't tell you. But if you spend time in a community, they tell you these things. Right? You know that house. Before those guys moved in, there was a granny who used to live there, and he hanged himself, whatever. You know these little things. You can only know them if you're interested in that community. And when somebody tells you, hey, I want 2 million, you tell them, no, you can't have 2 million. Why? Oh, by the way, I know you guys, these trees that you planted here are plastic, although they look natural. Because you spend time in that community, and that's the point I'm making. That the new seller in the market might demand those things, right? Including, personally, I demand the BE certificate, which is something like that. And I'm not going to go through the individual. I'm just going to pick up specific elements that are in that certificate. And before you go, normally I ask people a favor that I present to that I want evidence that I was here. All right? So when I go to my bosses and say, no, I was there, I can say, here's a picture. This is the room that was full of people. So I normally take a picture of my audience because I love my audience so much. All right? So BE certificate looks like that. At the top, it will be the name of the company where you want to do a verification, right? And then at the bottom, you'll see the word stem, SANAS certified. SANAS is the organization that certifies all BE verification companies belong to that organization. It's a DTI organization, and they all say SANAS certified, all right? And then it will have that code of arms, whatever it is, it's a proper certificate. Then what happens is that particular certificate, it will have the elements. So you don't see them, but that's why I got down to point them. My apologies to the guy on the other side of the room, is that the different elements is the first one, the second one. So that where you see the blocks, and for the guys that I need to go with me that are on the other side, it will say BE status at the top. Those are the elements that you need, that you're following. All right. And then eventually it gives you a score. It says out of the 107, 117, depending on what sector you're using, it will give you a score. Then right at the top, it gives you a level. You are level 2, based on that score that you have achieved. That's the certificate. So in the future, you deal with some smarty pants like me, who says, I want a certificate, and you rock up with a certificate, or somebody gives you a certificate, you look at it, who says, no, this doesn't look real, because it doesn't have a SANA certification. I'm sharing this with you for information purposes, because you may never know who you might meet in the street tomorrow. All right. Okay? And this is how the scores are calculated. That's why that's there, and how it works. All right. This is the point where I'm going to ask for the mic, because this is the end. There's nothing beyond that slide. It's just the scoring. It's still it shows you how do you score to arrive at that certificate.